Hello, welcome to another instalment of the Matchpit Racing Review with me and Don McLean, who will be looking back at what was a pretty straightforward Irish derby, to be honest. Everything that was expected happened. We had a dual winner of the Great Classic, again in the form of Anthony. Oh, no, wait. Sovereign absolutely spoilt the party, Don. You were there. We'll get stuck straight into it. First of all, what was your take on? Because we're shooting at a brilliant son of Galileo winning an Irish derby. And actually, maybe we are in the form of Sovereign, but it just wasn't what we expected.
No, it wasn't, Tom. Aidan O'Brien wins his 13th Irish derby. As you say, no surprise there. But no, it was kind of a bit weird watching the race unfold. You know, as the race was developing, suddenly we were going, these two are quite far clear. And you know, the Curragh, as we've mentioned here before, Tom, it's a big galloping track and it's a stiff track. But at the same time, on fast ground as it was on Saturday, it's hard to come from too far behind unless they've gone very fast up front. And in fairness to Padraig Beggy, he set his fractions to suit his own horse. He got out in front. Everybody knew that Sovereign was going to go forward and probably that Norway was going to go forward as well. So we all knew how the race was going to be run. So there was no surprise at all when he flashed out of the gates and settled into his rhythm in front. But then just running down the hill into the home straight, kind of went, you know, he's a long way clear. And suddenly Ryan Moore was getting animated on Anthony Van Dyke. Broome never got into the race. Chris Hayes was taking Mad Moon just out to deliver his challenge. And, you know, we knew that he had to, like, they had an awful lot of ground to make up. And in fairness to Sovereign, he kept on. Like, he ran all the way to the line. And, you know, look, so on one level, absolute shock, a 33-1 shot, who probably should have been higher, rated in the low hundreds, taking on horses who are rated a stone or thereabouts superior to him. And not only that, but he looked like an exposed 3-year-old. Like, it wasn't like he had a rating in the low hundreds with lots of potential to improve. But obviously, you know, he had, I suppose that was only, that on the other side, that was only his second run over a mile and a half. His first run was in the Derby when he kind of missed the break and raced very prominently and was ridden aggressively. So you could allow him that. And also visually, watching the race, like, he was a good winner. And the way that he came clear of Norway, who raced up just in behind him, that was impressive. And he had the race won, like, looking back on the replay, knowing the result, he had the race won from a long way out. And if a horse who was, you know, if Broome or Anthony Van Dyke had done that, you would have thought a very, very good Irish Derby winner.
I think there are 2 points you pick up, what you mentioned then, almost happened at a similar sort of time. If you pick it up around the 2 pole, you've got, if you almost pause it, Ryan Moore produces Anthony Van Dyke to go and pick up Norway and then to, you assume, go and pick up Sovereign. And actually, at that point, you think he's going to. You think that Anthony Van Dyke, who has a bit of ground to make up, maybe 8 or so lengths, but looks as though he's going to go off and going to go and reel in the front too. Of course, he does reel in Norway eventually, but he doesn't get anywhere near Sovereign. But the trouble is, for those in behind, at that point, Padraig Beggy gives him a tap of the whip, the horse in front, and he quickens. Now, that tells us that the fact that he can quicken like that, well, we know he's a good horse anyway. But I think what he got on the day, Don, was the most efficient ride the horse has ever had in his career. And a lot's been made of Padraig Beggy, who you know likes to win these derbies at big prices. But he gave the horse an excellent ride with regards to efficiency. Now, a couple of things obviously lent themselves to that. He didn't have as much challenge up top as he did in the Derby, where I think palpably they went too quick. So he didn't give himself a chance of winning the race. That was obviously all, you know, perhaps he was sacrificed in that. I think we often look at it, particularly at Epsom, whoever Aidan O'Brien or the team send forward, their chance really is gone the moment they're in front at the Derby. Prior to that, in the 2 trials he had, certainly in the most recent one, where Broome beat him, I don't think he went quick enough to suit him because he looks a dour stayer. And Aidan O'Brien talking afterwards him as a proper ledger horse. And I think he got a ride, the most efficient ride he's ever had, and a ride that really suited his staying qualities, i.e. he didn't crawl, he went at a decent pace, but then still had enough left in the tank to then quicken turning in. And that's what really did for those in behind. But I think the other key point was Broome missing the break. Now, he was meant to sit third. And had it been perhaps he that Ryan was tracking and not a horse like Guaranteed, because we almost had two groups developed on it, looked as though that when Jim Bolger's horse started to fade, that gap, and the horse in front started to quicken, that gap suddenly got insurmountable. And had it been a better horse, perhaps, sat in third, that might have just changed the shape of the race, but it wasn't to be.
Yeah, Ruby made that point on Saturday, Tom, and it's a very good point. It was Anthony Van Dyke wasn't initially getting to third place. Like, Broome missing the break definitely altered the shape of the race, because even Aidan O'Brien said afterwards that, you know, they kind of thought Broome might sit third. I mean, of course you can't plan how a horse is going to pan out, but they thought that he'd be handed. He missed the break quite badly, so he had no option but to sit where he sat then. So Anthony Van Dyke was left in third place, who, as we saw in the Epsom Derby, he's a potential St. Ledger horse as well. He just couldn't, or didn't bridge that gap. Like, Ryan Moore was always going to ride him in his comfort zone. So and obviously the early pace was fast. So Anthony Van Dyke allowed a gap to develop between him, who was leading the main group, and the two leaders. Now then Guaranteed moved into third place in front of Anthony Van Dyke. But by then, after they'd gone 2 furlongs, the race was set up. And as Ruby was saying again on Saturday, after you've gone the first 2 or 2.5 furlongs at the Curragh over a mile and a half, then you start to climb, and you don't want to be making ground at that early stage in the race on the incline. Then they get to the top of the hill and they start to freewheel. So horses, they travel around about the same speed going downhill, so it's hard to make up ground there as well. So suddenly, when with the winner Sovereign and Norway, I knew it was a country, where they'd suddenly set up a gap of about 8 lengths on the rest of the field. And, you know, look, we've seen it before in mile-and-a-half races. The leaders go up in front and they come back at the Curragh as well. But given that Sovereign has won it, and you're looking for reasons for it, like that was a key part of the race, that gap. And it looks like Sovereign made that and created that gap on the rest of the field relatively easily for himself. He was just going, like, Padraig Beggy wasn't scrubbing him along and asked him to go faster than he wanted to go. He just allowed him to get into his early racing rhythm, which was fast, and took him clear. And then the race was set up. So he was going to have that 8-length gap or thereabouts for quite a while, bar something unusual happened in behind. And then Mad Moon as well, Chris Hayes, like, he had to ride, I think he had to ride the race that he rode. He had to sit in behind. That you've got the even money favourite beside him, Anthony Van Dyke. You've got Broome behind him. So he's the horse with the turn of foot, as we saw at Epsom. He's not going to use up his horse to bridge the gap between the main pack and the front two, given that they're both, you know, big price outsiders. So he's riding his race to use his horse's turn of foot to beat, I guess, Anthony Van Dyke and Broome, because they were the 3 horses who were clear in terms of form and ratings and prices. So that all made sense. It's just that then the two got so far clear, it was difficult to catch them.
And I think that's another thing to pick up on is you judge Mad Moon's performance to an extent on what he did comparatively with Anthony Van Dyke, because Chris Hayes rode his horse to try and beat Anthony Van Dyke. He tracked Ryan Moore throughout the race. Those jockeys in behind, I think in particular perhaps Chris Hayes, or maybe that's just what I've seen, got a lot of stick about their rides. But I think everyone except for Broome and his rider would have been happy with what was happening at the first half of the race, probably, because that was where they wanted to be. And I don't necessarily think that, and it's also important to pick up on that actually, judging Mad Moon, he didn't beat Anthony Van Dyke, and perhaps there's something to take out of that. Maybe he does want to go back in trip, perhaps, because he wasn't staying on as strongly as you might have liked for another crack, perhaps at a mile and a half. And he also got quite worked up, I think, or quite warm before the race. But there was a period probably halfway through the race where you'd suggest that all bar one rider was perhaps happy with his position. I'm not necessarily sure that they thought, you know, Ryan Moore was going down the back thinking, well, I'm not going quick enough here. Because I think a bit of expectancy bias creeps into it when you've got, and perhaps this is a problem throughout the season, when you have Coolmore dominating in numbers fields like this and trials like this. You know, Sovereign, who went forward in the Derrinstown and the Beresford, who has been beaten by Broome before, who was beaten by Broome having gone forward at Epsom and beaten by Anthony Van Dyke as well. That expectancy bias then creeps into our minds as punters. It then creeps into jockeys' minds as well and says, well, I know what is going to happen here because Sovereign will come back to us because that is what has happened 2, 3, 4 times before. And yet all of a sudden, you're not allowed, you almost can't allow yourself to judge that individual moment because it's conditioned by what's gone before, and therefore you can't quite react accordingly. But I don't know, perhaps I'm overfishing into it, but it just, something was very different on this occasion, which meant that we had a 33-1 shot who had been beaten easily by two of these horses and two of his last three goes or whatever, suddenly ran out a very comfortable winner of an Irish Classic.
Yeah, I think Ryan Moore did cop quite early that the leaders were a long way clear, and I don't think there's much he could have done. Anthony Van Dyke, he's a staying horse. We saw in the Derby, he won the Derby through stamina. Like he was when they went by, when Mad Moon showed that turn of foot. Okay, he ran into a wee bit of traffic at Epsom, but he didn't have the turn of foot that Mad Moon had at the 3 furlong pole. So he was left in behind in a position from which it's very, very difficult to win a Derby. Like I think he traded at 8-something-1 in running at that point. So he's a stamina horse, and you can't just use up a horse even if he does stay well at an early point in the race to get into a position where I'm sure Ryan Moore wanted to be closer to the front too, but he had to. You have to ride your horse. You can't go faster than a horse wants to go in the early point of a race, or you'll burst him regardless of how far he stays. So, and I think even coming down the hill, Ryan Moore was niggling. He wasn't going, those two will come back, okay, no problem. I think he was aware of it, and he did niggle Anthony Van Dyke along. And Chris Hayes likewise. You don't know what went through a jockey's mind at different points in the race by talking to them after the race, but I'm sure he was anxious as well. But he couldn't do anything about it. Like he really, like if he had asked Mad Moon for his effort earlier than he did and tried to bridge the gap, it would have detracted from Mad Moon's chance of winning the race, and it just would have been the wrong ride to give a horse. That's for sure. So he had to ride in behind, and it's a legitimate strategy to ride to beat the 5-4 favourite, and then see how things develop. Obviously, if the 5-4 favourite isn't travelling, then you ride to win. But I think it was legitimate for Chris Hayes to expect that Anthony Van Dyke would take him into the race and would take him closer to his two big price outsider stable companions.
Yeah, I think exactly right. That Chris Hayes rode a race to beat the 5-4 favourite. He didn't change that plan to suddenly ride a race to beat the 33-1 outside, or one of the outsiders who was 10 lengths clear, because he would have burst Mad Moon entirely. Had suddenly changed that plan mid-race.
Yeah, like if he had used up Mad Moon, and if he had bridged the gap and used him to get there, he probably would have been passed by Anthony Van Dyke and probably 3 or 4 or 5 others, and then that would have been a bad ride. But I don't think he gave Mad Moon a bad ride. I think he rode the race that he had to ride. I think the race, it developed around him the wrong way for Mad Moon. And I think Anthony Van Dyke as well, if Broome had been in front of him, and Broome, as we know, as we saw on the Darren stand, the Ballysacks over 10 furlongs, he's a real galloper who just grinds and grinds when he's on song. I think if he had sat third, he could have been the one to bridge the gap, or to at least bring them a wee bit closer than they were turning for home.
Who was the best horse in the race, Don?
I think Sovereign. I think Sovereign was the best horse in the race on the day at the trip. I think he got a very, I don't know what the sections are yet, but I think he got a very efficient ride from Pádraig Beggy to win the race as he did. And as you say, he kicked on again on the 2 furlong pole. He had the race won from a long way out. He came clear of Norway. I think on the day, the horse who won by 6 lengths was the best horse in the race. Surprise! What do you think? Who was the best horse in the race?
Yeah, I would be reluctant to use words like fluke, and I would want to praise the rider for giving him such an efficient ride. The time was a second slow on good ground. He didn't nick it. He got the perfect ride for him, a strong staying horse who can quicken, which shows what a good horse he is. And he was being judged on the day by how he'd been used previously in races which hadn't suited him. I mean, yes, I know as a 2-year-old he was beaten by Japan. He's got a history of being beaten by stable companions, which conditioned how we judged him. But he was ridden perfectly to suit him on the day, and he has to be considered the best horse, and he has to be considered a live candidate for a St. Leger, which could well turn out to be his ideal test, if you like. I mean, he's a son of Galileo with bundles of stamina on his damn side as well. I'd still want to have a go at Anthony Van Dyke, given that ground that he did make up against him in a race on a different day, but I still think that'd be factored into the prices. Sovereign would probably be underestimated again going forward. So there you go. But there was a real sense, and obviously I wasn't there, but on the outpouring on social media, other than a lot of stick that the Curragh got elsewhere, there was a real sense of it feeling unsatisfactory, and that's a shame, I think, for an Irish classic. Is that what it felt to you being there on the day?
Yeah, it did, Tom. It really did, and it was a pity because there was a good buzz around the place. You know, I know 11,000 odd people there. There was a good atmosphere, that, you know, a real sense of occasion atmosphere at the Curragh on the day, and we had good racing beforehand. Like Speaking Colours was a very good winner for Joseph O'Brien, who had a hell of a weekend. Ger Lyons had a treble, including Siskin, who I know we'll talk about now in a sec. So there was a great, like, Siskin was just before the Irish Derby. There was a really good buzz going into the Irish Derby. But yeah, when Sovereign won it, there weren't many cheers. You know, it was a real sense of what happened there. You know, how did that, and then people going and having a look at Pádraig Beggy again. You know, it was a bit surreal on just in the minutes after the race had been run.
Yeah, I can imagine. But the lads did it again, and there's also this possibility of the John Smith's Cup. I saw a brilliant tweet out there with Aidan O'Brien. Imagine Aidan O'Brien going into the Irish Derby saying, lads, the plan is the John Smith's Cup, but the thing is, we've got to win the Irish Derby to get in.
Yeah, we think the £5 penalty will get us there.
The thing is, we've got to,
I haven't read that the Ebor is under consideration, and I don't know, could he run in it now? And I know he's not entered for the. I haven't even checked our entries in for the Ebor. Like, he's a 3-year-old, so would he even get in on this? I'm sure he'd get in on
now. He would have with what he'd be rated off the back of that. Yes, I mean but because of the influx of money, of sponsorship, really across that whole division, but particularly with that Ebor, I mean, it's going to change shape with the horses that want to go there. I hadn't even considered it. I don't really think they'll go John Smith's Cup when they're talking about things like the King George, etc.
Yeah, no, I doubt it. I doubt it. But I think the Ledger is probably, you know, that's the most obvious target for him now, and how he gets there. You know, maybe the King George. Maybe the King George could be the route to, but he could be on track for the Ledger. Anthony Van Dyke could be on track for the Ledger. Broome could be on track for the Ledger. So they could all end up going.
Although they sort of ruled that out.
Yeah, I think Japan might stay. I think the King George might be the race for Japan. 1.5 miles could be his route, all right.
You mentioned Siskin. Go. What about this horse? He's now won his third race over the 6 furlongs. He looks set for a tilt at a Group 1 next, and he was electric, I thought, on the day.
Yeah, like that. There was nothing not to like about Siskin. He just did everything. He was so relaxed in the parade ring beforehand, so relaxed through his race, to pick up like he did, to come clear of Monarch of Egypt. I know Monarch of Egypt had a wee bit of a setback since he won his maiden, or a novice stakes, I think it was. I don't think it was a maiden. And he was weak in the market beforehand, but Siskin just came away from him. And Fort Myers was third. He finished 4th in the Coventry. A little bit of an eye catch in the Coventry Stakes as well when he finished 4th. So Siskin, to come clear of him, well, it was just a really, really impressive professional performance. Eased down and patted on the neck close on by Colin Keane, who gave him just a no-nonsense, superb ride. And Ger Lyons, like, to skip Royal Ascot with him, to resist the temptation of going to the Coventry Stakes. And, you know, when he won the last day, when he won the Marble Hill, Ger Lyons did say, you know, everyone was talking about the Coventry Stakes. I think he was put in a relatively short price for the Coventry, and he did say, the Coventry's not a given, or not definitely going for the Coventry. I'd love to come back here and win the Railway Stakes, and that's exactly what he did. And, you know, patience with this horse, and like Ger Lyons, he's such a thoughtful trainer. You know, he won't go anywhere, including to Royal Ascot, with the horse who isn't fully deserving of being there. And if there's a better option, then he's not lured by the attraction of Royal Ascot. He'll go for the right. Like, he had a 5-horse race yesterday, or on Saturday, a Group 2 5-horse race at home, where he doesn't have to travel, go and win, and he's won it really well. And now we're talking about the Phoenix Stakes over 6 furlongs again, back at the Curragh, a Group 1 race, and that's the target for now, apparently. And yeah, like, what's going to beat him there? Might probably meet Monarch of Egypt again, and then maybe later in the season you can think about maybe going up to 7 furlongs. But for now, 6 furlongs.
Is that where you think they see him ending up, 7 furlongs at the end of the season?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like, the National Stakes is over 7. here. The Dewhurst obviously over 7 at Newmarket. Middle Park's a Group 1 over 6. So that all those races come onto his radar. But no, he looks exceptional. You know, I know he's only run 3 times now. We like with all 2-year-olds, we have a limited body of evidence, but he's just looked very good at everything that he's done, and he looked better than ever, I thought, on Saturday.
Guineas or Commonwealth Cup horse? I love in July technically, but I love pigeonholing these horses. Years time, apologies, but that's what we're thinking, isn't it? You know, you win a Group 2 like that, you talk a Group 1 next, you're a 2-year-old 6. That's it, isn't it? Is he a Guineas horse?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's every chance he will be, but it's not a given. Like, it's not certain that he'll get a mile next year. He definitely gets 6 and gets 6 very strongly now. You would hope
he will on pedigree. Looking at it, on pedigree, he should get a mile. There's stamina on his damn side, encouraging enough from his sire. But the way he races, is he relaxed enough? He obviously quickens, but is there anything about the way he races that tells you that he might not suit a mile?
No, there isn't. I think he travels, he relaxes, and that gives him every chance of getting any trip. And then he quickens, and I'm sure he could. You know, if Colin Keane needed to wait another furlong before deploying that turn of foot, he could. And he's strong when he quickens. I think he goes to the line strongly. He did on both his races. Like, Monarch of Egypt had the run of the race, you could argue, on Saturday. He travelled in behind him, lovely, and then when Siskin picked up, he was following him through, and he just couldn't get to him. He just couldn't live with that turn. Now, I think Monarch of Egypt will probably come on for that, and he remains an interesting horse because, you know, he didn't have the ideal preparation for Saturday's race. We know he missed Royal Ascot, and he was very weak in the market. So I think it's reasonable to expect that Monarch of Egypt will improve again for that run, and he remains an exciting 2-year-old. So look, Siskin looked very good. I think we don't know if he'll get him. I think there's every chance he'll get 7. And you can, like, if you say that there's lots of stamina in his pedigree, but it's still an Oasis Dream mare that he's out of. So you know, it's not a given that I don't think it's a given that he'll get a mile. But at the same time, I think it's legitimate to train him that way. And you know, I'm not going to tell Gerard how to train his horses, but to maybe have the Guineas in mind and see how that goes.
Yeah, my initial thoughts were, watching it back, were a mile's a long way off. But I don't know. I take the point about him relaxing, and given connections, I'd imagine that is that's the Teddy Grimthorpe, I think, quoted afterwards as saying, you know, that's the route we'd be looking for. I think that's where they will hopefully see him regress, but we'll see how he develops next time we see him developing into a 7 furlong horse. You'd imagine towards the end of the season, probably Group 1 Phoenix Stakes next. What else caught your eye over the couple of days at the Curragh,
Donn? Joseph O'Brien had a hell of a weekend. Iridessa was she stepped forward and put in the performance that I expected her to put in the Guineas. There you go.
You did, yeah, you did. I remember you talking her up for the Guineas. She just looked just a different filly over an extra couple of furlongs, didn't she?
Yeah, no, exactly. And look, it's just taken her a little while. You know, her run in the Guineas trial was very encouraging. I thought she ran very well in the Guineas. She ran better than it. I think she only finished 8th in the end, but I think she ran better than that. And look, you know, she was a Group 1 winner already. Win another Group 1 race, that was great. And you know, probably, you know, one of the highlights of Joseph O'Brien's and Donnacha O'Brien's weekend. Jessica Harrington, her horses continue in tremendous form. She had 2 very interesting juvenile fillies. Albina, she won the Group 2 race, the early stud race on the Friday, and then Wind Racer won the first race, the fillies maiden, on the Thursday. Albina, she skipped Royal Ascot. She skipped the Albany Stakes and came on here. She didn't look a likely winner halfway, but she stayed on really strongly, and she's a filly who probably gets 7. So the Moidler Stud Stakes looks like the race for her, maybe preceded by the debutante. And Wind Racer, likewise, her maiden win, it was a really good maiden, and it historically is a really good maiden. And the Aidan O'Brien filly loved that she beat into 2nd place. She was well backed and well fancied. Inner Visions, Willie McCreary's filly, representing the Niarchos family, who also had Fisolana, who she's out of. So she's the daughter of Fisolana by Dubawi. She ran a nice race to finish 3rd, and the 2 of them came nicely clear of her. So I thought Wind Racer, I think that, you know, a lot of the focus of the Jessica Harrington horses will be on Albania, and of course she's won the Group 2 race. But I think Windracer, she could, there hasn't been much about her after her win. Maybe it was on a Thursday evening, and it was only a maiden in one sense, but it was a good performance. It was a good maiden, and I think she could step forward again as well. Yeah. What else got your eye?
One I'll mention just while we're on the subject of 2-year-olds who skip Royal Ascot. Summer Romance for Charlie Appleby. She did. She's obviously a daughter of Kingman. She's a half sister to Rosina. She's very well related, but she just looks really good. Now I know that she won the Empress, which obviously comes just off the back of Royal Ascot, and therefore it's won by horses who don't go to the Royal Meeting. But of course, she won it at Yarmouth very closely to Ascot. So I think I don't know why we didn't see her until then, but it was as if Ascot was never necessarily on her agenda. And I think post-race comments indicate just how much physical progression they expect her to make, which makes her very exciting. This was the sort of time of year last year that we had Corto winning for Charlie Appleby, for all that things haven't panned out quite right for him subsequently. But I think she's very, very exciting. She'll you'd hope, continue to progress. As far as getting further goes, I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. And talking of a Guineas filly next year, you'd have to put her into that bracket, given what Rosina achieved and given that she's a Kingman as well. But I thought she just looks so powerful, but one that's going to keep developing. So I suppose as far as all the performances away from the Curragh that caught my eye, she was probably the most exciting of them.
Yeah, sorry, just to correct Donnacha O'Brien, he had a fantastic weekend as well, but he didn't ride Iridessa. Wayne Lorden rode Iridessa, and he also rode Buckhurst, who is also another exciting horse. Who I think he was only having his 4th run there on Saturday when he won the Group 3 race, the International Stakes. And I know Adid came out of the race, which you can understand why he would have. The ground was probably too fast for him. I'm sure, like William Haggis, he's not going to run his horses if he deems the ground to be not suitable. Especially a horse as talented as Adid, who looked so good at Royal Ascot. But Buckhurst, I thought he did very well in beating Blenheim Palace and Georgeville. And he's a horse who could step forward again. So, yeah, another Joseph O'Brien horse.
Who's the star of the Curragh for you? You can have Sovereign, Don.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, why not Sovereign? Why not the Irish Derby winner? Yeah, dominated the weekend. Yeah. What about you? What was your highlight of the weekend?
Well, it was that. It has to be that. For all it may have felt unsatisfactory, I get that. I still think the best horse won on the day, and he was just vastly underestimated given what had gone before coming into the race. But he won on merit on the day for me, and he was very, very impressive. For all I'd maybe supported the short price favourite, which I don't often do, but there you go. I was looking at it thinking, goodness me, you'll go off shorter the day before, and we got that bit right. But it wasn't to be. Don, great stuff. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, Tom.
We will chat to you again. I'll chat to Don again next week, where it's going to be eclipse time. It's all going too quickly. We'll cross that when we get to it. That is it for this week's Matchbook Racing Review. We'll see you again next week. Bye for now.